Welcome to Santaroga Surplus. We're going to talk today about band state rifles, in this case the SKS, and today we are doing part 3 of the series, and we are discussing iron sights on the SKS rifles. One of the most common complaints about Comblock and Soviet rifles is that the sights are horrible. There's a reason for this, and it goes back in history. So we'll take a look at a 19th century pattern shortened to a modern carbine. This is an M44 carbine. This kind of sight radius that you're going to see here is very common when you get to Mauser carbines and other types of European rifles. This is part of the problem, but not all of the problem. The sight radius on one of these is about 16 inches, okay? It doesn't get any better. I'll show you some other rifles. And it is also a post instead of a barleycorn, so there's a little improvement, and a notch or a U sight. So it's not a very good sight picture to pick up and use for any type of precision shooting. You find this repeated throughout a lot of European systems all the way up until nearly the modern day. You also find this in the AK platform rifles. And remember that the AK is a carbine that can be a submachine gun. It's not a rifle that can be a carbine. This is a very short sight radius, but this is a sight radius that would work very well for you if you were closer to the sight picture. No one is going to argue with a 15-inch sight radius on a handgun and precision shooting at 100 yards with 44 Magnum Super Blackhawk. Okay, and there you're looking at something that's more like a 12 and a half, 13. It's a 13-inch sight radius if you're using a 10-inch barrel. And people will do beer contests shooting tuna cans at 100 meters all day long. No problem. Why is it so bad on an AK? One of the reasons is, again, that U-notch is really horrible. Another reason is that the sight is very far forward on the rifle. When you unfold that stock, you are sitting back here. Okay, remember that we're not dealing with precision shooting, we're getting way up there. We're here, okay? Combat style shooting. And your distance is a good 14 inches from your rear sight. So you have an eye relief of 14 inches and a sight radius of 15 inches. It's not a good combination, especially with U-notch sights. Enter the West, specifically America. Here is a later version of America. This is an A2 pattern rifle. You have a 20-inch sight radius. That's going to be important later because the SKS is not far off from that. The aperture is pretty close to your face, but not too close to your face, so you can still actually see the aperture. And this, 300 meters all day. No one's going to argue with 300 meters man-sized targets out of iron sights on an A2. It works. To show you an older example, because I don't actually currently have a Garand to show you, we'll use an M1 carbine. Again, you're looking at a good sight radius. In this case, you're looking at 21 inches. Okay, it actually varies a little depending on where you have your rear sight, because it slides back for elevation. And again, no one argues about the sight picture on these. You're not really set up to shoot 500 yards, but no one who shoots an M1 carbine says, "Oh, horrible sights." Everyone says, "Oh man, awesome sights." All right. We have another one, and this is just gun porn at this point, but we might as well bring it out. Everything is safe. Everything is unloaded. I'm actually using the magazine on this to hold it up. And this is an Argentine contract FAL, and it has a 22-inch sight radius, which is perfectly fine. On the FAL design, however, you brought the aperture so close to the shooter's eye, the eye relief is so short, that the pinhole is kind of fuzzed out to an extreme degree. And if there's any amount of astigmatism or tired eyes, you can get that fuzziness can start to impact your accuracy a little bit. But otherwise, nice sights. Now we're going to talk about the SKS. The SKS comes in two main variants with two different sight radii. And the shorter of the two is the longer rifle. This is a Yugo M5966, so it's going to actually be further back on the sight because everything is munged around to fit this grenade spigot. You have a 17 3/4 inch sight radius on this, or 17.5. However, you have night sights, which we'll talk about in a moment. All other standard SKS rifles have a 19-inch sight radius. Okay, this sits way far forward. This sits pretty far back. 19-inch sight radius is very good, and we're going to say in this case that it's not horrible that the sight is forward of the receiver, because you get a little bit closer than you do with an AK. You tend to get your cheek up a little bit higher, or a little bit further forward. The U-notch system is still just as bad, so you have to figure out a way to fix that. And fixing that is the key to successfully using iron sights as your main sights on a band state restrictive environment rifle, like this. The first kind of sight that you're going to have as a variation, I'm going to put this here because we're going to be using it, is the Williams peep sight. And I have a rifle with one installed, and this one I still use. I found that the Williams has a little bit of wiggle ability and is a little bit more difficult to adjust, and the aperture can be just the right size so that the picture of the aperture matches up with the size of your sight hood. And since on an SKS you generally adjust your sights from the front, your actual sight post may not be centered in your sight hood. And if you get things messed up that way, you end up being zeroed to your sight hood and not to your front sight. Fortunately, the Williams sight does actually have adjustability in the rear, windage and elevation both. It is a target sight, and it can be popped out, honestly. Okay, I find that they wiggle a little bit in high impact environments. So, this is your Williams sight, and it goes in under a roll pin. So it slides in, boop, and then the spring pressure of the spring that's in your rear sight block holds it. And it does a good job, okay? But it can pop out. It is also that aluminum construction thing that I don't particularly like on Soviet stuff. It's just aluminum and steel don't always go well together. It is adjustable for elevation with a screw that just elevates it against the spring inside your rear sight block. There's no lock screw for that, so if you want to be particularly careful, you're going to have to figure that out, or use some sort of, well, rubber cement would actually do a good job. And you have a set screw so that you can adjust your windage and then tighten the set screw back down, which works well enough as a target sight. This is the top end of a 5966 Yugo, so it does have the night sights. Night sights flip up on a Yugo, and you'll have photoluminescent paint or tritium vials depending on your version and whether or not you've refreshed your rifle. Okay, the rear one, or the front one, there's also a front one that is non-adjustable and flips up. However, these aren't supposed to be precision sights, they're for night fighting. And if you repair the phosphorescence and you make them bright and shiny again, they're very worth having, very worth using. The only problem with every rear sight replacement option that we're going to show you is that it does not include an ability to maintain the rear sight yet. If I find a supply of these rear sights, I will probably go ahead and work out a way to make matching aperture where I can still have the flip-up photoluminescence. in order to replace this sight with a Williams or with my design, which is what we're going to actually do for a moment, you have to drive out the sight. This is often confusing to people and seems like quite a process. Nothing could be simpler because this is, after all, Soviet stuff. You want to pad your table a little bit. You just get that down. The sight rides in a channel, okay? The pin is going to come down the channel and then go straight out the back. So what you have to do is get it down and back far enough to start it on the channel. And the way you do that is you take a punch and you drive it at a slight angle. You just give it a good whack. Once it's started there, then you can use a very light hammer and just kind of tap it back, and you'll feel it come out, and it's out. Very simple. No problems doing that. And then you can see U-notch. And the ones I make, and I've been told there's another company that makes these, so fair warning, there's a company, or not warning, fair, to be fair to everyone. I'm not the only supplier of these. The company in Canada that makes the quick rail is called Magwedge, and they also make an aperture that uses apparently the same military sight structure. Okay, I don't know if they're having theirs batch made in China because they can do that because they're in Canada or what. Mine are made off of depot surplus sights. They're just old stock sights, and I grind them down and I weld my apertures on. So this is a military sight. It has a decent aperture. You can make them different sizes. I like 2.5 millimeter because it's definitely smaller than your front sight hood, so you don't get tied up in your brain with that. All you need to do to get this in is slide it in. If you're doing the Williams, you're going to clamp the spring down with some sort of clamp, and you're going to drive a roll pin through. And then you're going to keep the spring clamped down from the front. You're going to slide this in, and then you're going to release the pressure, and it should hold in. With this is being a military sight, all you're going to do is push down the spring until you get the sight started. And then you just kind of push it till it pops up. And the spring holds it in. Everything's good. And you have your full range of adjustment from 100, 200, 300 meters and all the stupid numbers that no one can ever use because these are not made for 1,000 yards. There's another sight on the market, and it does a very good job if you want to mess with it. At this point in time, it should be pretty obvious that I don't particularly like to mess with my receiver cover attachments. And enter the tech sight. Now the tech sight has the advantage of bringing the rear sight aperture very close to your face. You have functionally no eye relief. You're looking at an inch, inch and a half. Again, it can be too close and it can fuzz out your aperture a little bit too much for fine work, just like the FAL. However, it is a lot closer than your U-notch or aperture here. I don't have a problem using an aperture this far away. The U-notch is a stone cold pain in the neck. So this is definitely an improvement. The way it works is you replace your pin, you take your pin out, you replace the pin with a detachable pin. This goes in, the pin closes on. You have 4 set screws that put pressure onto the back of the receiver, outside of the receiver cover area, and that holds the sight in where it's supposed to be. And in theory, you can retain zero by taking the pin out, field stripping, putting this back on, getting the pin back in without egging out your holes and stretching everything out, and not have to adjust your set screws. My experience with this is that you're going to end up adjusting your set screws no matter what. So you're going to have to re-zero. On the other hand, you don't really have to take this firearm apart very often. I would, if I was going to use this just in any given match, I'd probably be taking it apart 3 or 4 times because I live in an area with a lot of sand. If I was to do a 2-day match with 6 stages, I would probably clean this. This would come apart probably 4 or 5 times. So that's the thing. It does, however, give you a 29-inch sight radius, which is pretty phenomenal if you think that's that important. Again, a 15-inch sight radius is not actually a problem if you've got a good sighting system. And this is a 19-inch sight radius, which is just fine. It's plenty good for decent accuracy. Now, all of this is me trying to tell you not to mess with the back of your receiver. Try out an aperture front sight. Put 1,000 rounds through your rifle, various positions, speed shooting, come up and get a target. See if it works, and then think about a red dot. There's nothing wrong with red dots. Red dots are fantastic for where I live because I have to do night shooting. And it's not people. I'm not in a combat zone. I happen to live on a goat ranch with pigs, and that means coyotes. So night shooting, a red dot and a floodlight is your best friend. But even if you just have a flashlight and an aperture sight, you're in way better shape than trying to line up a U-notch. U-notches at night you just don't do it. It's impossible. It does not work. The Yugoslavian night sight system is actually set up as a 3-dot system, just like a pistol, and it's about as accurate. You're going to be like, yeah, I know I'm pointing that way, kind of, mostly. So, not for distances past 50 yards. Apertures, just get one, just do it, then think about whether or not you need to bubba up your rifle. I will say, I'm not going to argue with anyone who wants to put a red dot on in an intelligent fashion. I would probably try to maintain my rear sight if I was going to maintain my front sight. So in the last video I showed you the SKS scout thing, and that I would probably enjoy more if I was going to take the front sight block off of the little SKS Model M, and I'm considering doing that because the rear sight's gone, and you do get more accuracy once you take off all the stuff that's hanging on the front of the rifle. Anyway, so that's all I got for you. As you can see, it's easy to replace the sights. You really want to try your iron sights. Give it 1,000 rounds. Spend $200 on ammo. And just run the gun. If at that point in time you think you need a set of a red dot set, go ahead, get it. We'll go ahead and do install videos of that later on. If you need optics, and I'm not going to say no one needs magnified optics, I use them quite often, and that I'm going to suggest that you stick with the Co-8 side rail mount that I showed you. Possibly, well, I'll give the mag wedge a shot when I can find a budget to order one, and maybe that'll work. But you're slowing down your rifle. You're interfering with your performance space when you do that. One of the best things about not using the Williams is that these are very durable. And this is your performance space. So you don't want to put on sighting systems that mess with you feeding your rifle, clearing jams on your rifle. Okay? This on the back, probably just fine, but it's going to impact how you tear down your rifle. I've never had a jam where I had to quickly take the receiver cover off. I take that back. I did actually one time, but it wasn't somewhere where I had to quickly do it. I just did have to do it. So keep that clean if you can, and get good with an aperture. Have a good one.